Good morning, everybody. My name is Kevin Apple, and I'm the chairman of Avondale Corporate. I hope you can see me. I don't know whether the tech is working, usual problems this morning. But anyway, look, thank you for joining us this morning. Today's webinar, Creating Competitive Advantage in Volatility. The webinar comes from this book. Hopefully you can see that on sales, but I can't see my screen, so I don't quite know why it's doing that. But anyway, look, we wrote this book about 4 to 5 years ago, how to be strategically ahead in changing markets, creating competitive advantage. And you can see that what we have cleverly done is switch the changing markets to volatile markets. Obviously, that's a reflection of COVID and Brexit. So how can we create advantage given the level of volatility that we're seeing in the marketplace today? We've got about an hour. I'm going to be talking probably 20 minutes, something like that. And then Joe Hinton from UK Business Mentors is going to be joining me and hopefully heckling me, if you like, in terms of some of the content. What did he like? What didn't he like? What works? What doesn't work? So, creating competitive advantage in dynamic markets or volatile markets. The other inspiration for the webinar this morning is this quote from Steve Jobs: "Let's go invent tomorrow instead of worrying about what happened yesterday." And obviously there's been a lot of worry out there. It's very, very choppy seas for many entrepreneurs. Lockdown and so on, causing us significant challenges in the business. And of course, we've all been learning through this process. So what we'd like to think today on the webinar, when we get to the Q&A, if you can also share your observations and any questions you've got, that would be incredibly helpful, so that we can all chew the fat on the subject. And so we'll also be recording the webinar, so if any of your colleagues want to, share it, that's fine. So I've got 3 key bits from the book Creating Competitive Advantage that I'd like to share. The first is a chapter called Leadership versus Management. Now, the key premise behind this concept, if you like, Michael Gerber's book, E-Myth. Now, E-Myth, which is, have business mentors, you'd have heard it time and time again. And the simple idea is that you run your business as a process, you run it as a system, and you work on the business, not in it in terms of strategy. Now, the issue that we had with that is that the challenge for entrepreneurs is we go hands-on in that work. And in particular, we feel guilty when we're not working. So the idea of spending time designing a system and a process doesn't feel that intuitive to many entrepreneurs. So they try it, they then feel uncomfortable, and of course they go hands-on again. So the idea of leadership versus management was, well, what do we get management to do, and what's the difference between leadership and management? And ultimately, what's the high value areas we can spend our time on versus the low value? And in that analysis, new products, strategic alliances, acquisitions, and new territories around the vision is where the really strong business leaders operate, delegating to the management. And obviously this is in theory, because you may not have a big team to delegate, but delegating where you can all the other areas to operate on. So it's not just about creating a process and system, it's then about where you can set the vision ahead of the market. So one of the other challenges we see, there's an awful lot of businesses that are doing the same thing as the people down the road. So it's very difficult to stand out. So a key question is, how can we be better? Why are we better? And actually, ultimately, not just saying that, but understanding how you can be better and where you can be better. That takes time. And in volatility, it's even harder to get at. If you like leadership, we like to think we look up, whereas the management is kind of almost like looking down. And at the moment, because of the volatility, our eyes are being dragged down. But conceptually, how can you spend more time working on the strategy and the business plan? you hear in volatile markets a lot of people saying that we want to operate an agile strategy. I really don't like that word, agile. For me, the problem with agile is it makes it basically an excuse not to do business plans. And ultimately, however volatile the markets are post-COVID, we need a really clear plan of how we're going to get advantage. And that takes time. So you've got to get permission from your team to go and get that time to design the business around how you can take advantage. I also think there's a key area. If you're looking at a lot of competition, margins get eroded. You know, one of the key areas is how can you find a niche that you can own, and how can you then amplify that niche? So we're really big on the idea that you need to get ahead of the market to create pull, not push in the market. I listened the other day, I don't know if any of you guys do, but there's a great podcast on BBC called Disruptors. I listened to Max Hastings, the founder of Netflix, and he did a really good podcast on the sort of whole history of Netflix. It was very candid. They came from an IT background, and he felt that they didn't do a great job with that business. But the next business, Netflix, they started to see that streaming would become really important for film. Remember, they had the IT background, so they got the foothold in running DVDs by post, knowing that streaming wasn't up to it. But of course, once they had that foothold, they could transfer it to streaming. What I didn't know, and I thought was fascinating, is they actually went to talk to blockbusters early in the cycle. I think it was around 2007, 2008. Now, Blockbusters at the time was a billion pound company. And they tried to do a deal to do their streaming services, and they couldn't sort it out. I think it would have cost Blockbusters 50 million at the time. Now, well, we all know the history. Netflix is billions and billions, and Blockbusters is today zero. And I think, you know, one of the points of that story is that Blockbusters didn't know how to positively disrupt their business model. And I think it's very, very important in the difference between leadership and management. We're going to cover a little bit more on that in a second. But really, within this concept of leadership versus management, how do we design our businesses so that we're further ahead of the market and we can see more what our future customers are going to want, and therefore create pull? And we want motivation in our customers and our buyers going forward. And again, I appreciate with volatility, this is great. This is on paper and in theory. You know, you've all got your stresses and trials and tribulations, but I still think this holds credibility. So I came up with the idea of the line of probability. Now, this actually, if you're a sci-fi geek like me, it actually is stolen from Isaac Asimov's psychohistory. And basically, psychohistory was, if you've got enough people and you collate enough data, you can predict the future of the universe. Now, I'm not asking you guys to do that. What I am saying, that post-COVID, the pace of change that we've got will accelerate further. COVID actually has increased the virtualization of our world. 9 out of the top 10 most valuable companies are digital companies. I think Coca-Cola is the only one that's still hanging in there. So we've got faster change than ever. The only way you can deal with that as leaders is to anticipate it better than others and then place your business ahead of it rather than chasing it. To do that, we need to spend more time playing. We need to spend more time in research. Very difficult to do with volatility. But what do I mean by line of probability? I mean mapping out what the history of your sector has been and then trying to extrapolate from that what the possibilities are. And I talk about something called macro data, which is the basic research across the whole economies, but in particular, what is happening slightly off piste to your sector, because I think that's where the best ideas come from. So, you know, if you're B&B, what are Airbnb doing, for example? If you're Blockbusters, what are the postage video guys doing, for example? And then looking at those trends, trying to understand them, and that's often where the best ideas come from. We get very siloed in a corridor of our sector. You know, you start because you have an inspiration for how to do it better, but very quickly you start looking at your competitors, understanding how they do, and following rather than leading. And it's really difficult to break that cycle. So the macro data is a way of doing that. So if you like, walk into the wilderness, do your research. The micro data is, of course, what your business is telling you. What's the dashboard telling you? So, is your customer base getting older? Are your margins decreasing? What does that tell you? And how do you get around that? All of that stuff. But if you start getting that data and that research, then we've got a chance to go, actually, what are our ideas of how to be better, how to be ahead of the competition? How do we change the business model, products, services, and possibly within that, if we go back to the leadership style, what new products, acquisitions, strategic alliances do we need to have to change the business model? Again, blockbusters should have done that strategic alliance with Netflix. But of course, that's easy to look at in hindsight. And I think one of the challenges we have, and I think actually in my book, this is possibly the most interesting slide. It's the chapter I probably paid the least attention to when writing, because I thought it was understood. But the more I think about it, the more I meet business owners, and I'm lucky in Avondale, we get to meet 50 to 100 a year. The more I think this is important. And obviously, businesses need to evolve. And there's the Darwin phrase there, it's not the strongest of the species that survive, it's those most adaptive to change. But how do they evolve, and how can you do that with the level of volatility that we've got, and also in terms of what direction from the business model point of view? And we think that one of the biggest challenges in certainly the SME and emerging mid-market that we specialize in, we help people buy and sell companies, and we also do strategy and finance in the sort of 1.5, 2 million to 35, 40 million deal value. So very much the SME end of the UK market. And what's interesting is when you look at those companies is how often there is a second tier management, but they're not trained. They don't have the benefit of the corporate training budget. There's 7,000 PLCs in the UK, or 7,000 corporates in the UK, and there's something like 240,000 SMEs that employ more than 10 people. And those businesses do not train their staff. They do not have the training budget to train their management. I think that's really interesting. So what you often find is you've got managers that are good at maintaining the status quo, entrepreneurs that encourage that. So they employ them to be reliable. We want them to drive the profits. We want them to keep the customers happy today. And of course, people who are good at reliability aren't necessarily good at disruption. And it kind of goes full circle to the Netflix blockbuster story. But actually, I mean, another great example is the Microsoft IBM story. IBM commissioned Bill Gates to do the coding. They thought hardware was the future and not software. Was that because they were caught in their corridor of thinking? Or was it because of the vested interest of the management team to maintain the status quo? We like reliability, and we like the sector that we're in because we understand it. We don't want to go outside of those core competencies. And I think one of the keys you can do to create vision and to navigate ahead of the market is to work more strongly with the second tier, to get them to drive what I call the kind of almost incremental changes, whilst the senior leadership go off and look at, I suppose, if you like, we want a better word, the more radical changes, which ones work, which don't, and build the plan around that. So it's giving the team greater responsibility to make the changes on the ground on a day-to-day basis. And within that context, also permission to fail, right? Because nothing ever works first time. It will not survive engagement, if you like, with the enemy and with the customers, and you will have to adapt it. And often what you find is when people try new things, it doesn't sort of work, they lose the will to live. I mean, a great example of this with the whole virtualisation. Everybody's moving to the cloud. We all love the cloud. It's really difficult to join everything up in the cloud. Obviously, there are specialists and experts that help do that. But it's quite fascinating how often you see that they got near to making the change, but the team just got in the way of the change because old habits die hard, and they didn't quite spend enough on adopting the new technology. And ultimately what happens is people find a way to circumnavigate the system because we're kind of lazy, right? And we don't enjoy that change. Well, if you can cascade the change through your senior management so that they're the ones driving those changes, not you as a leader, then it is far more likely to be effective. So ultimately, second tier management, roles and responsibility, how much are they driving incremental change as opposed to you? And can you buy time by educating them and training them to drive those incremental changes and take more ownership on them, whilst you look further ahead in the market and figure out what your future customers are going to want? So I'm nearly finished, Rampton, so we're going to move to some debate on this in a minute. But I thought that we ought to talk a little bit about change management. So it's all very well going, right, I've looked into the wilderness, I've seen what others are doing, I've seen what our data is doing, I can see where we need to take this business. I have a dream, follow me. Will you try that these days? People will come back at you with all the reasons why they don't want to. They are firefighting too, right? So it's really difficult to get change through. So a little tip, I'm quite an autocratic leader and it's a failing of mine, but actually I like this quote here from Jim Collins, don't have the personality, listen. I think the biggest failure that we have as leaders in driving change is we share content, not context. So content is, guys, this is the IT system we're going to run to. This is, you know, the vendor we've chosen. Go make it happen, right? That's autocratic, and that's content. That's the what. The key is, what is the why? Why do we need to improve our tech or automation? Why do we need to change our customer demographic? What is the data? Share the why with your team, and then you've got a chance of them being more innovative and coming up with ideas that help drive your business. So the concept here is that if you get the leadership versus management right, you get the vision more clear, you can be cascading ideas and changes down, but the team will then be pushing back up with thoughts and concepts back. So you can get a really clear drive and flow in the marketplace. And don't dictate. So for me, and I love this phrase, my team are really getting irritated with me by this now. It's, I don't know why, but I have some ideas. So I think we need to change the model. I think we need to move forward here, here, and here. I think our future customer is going to be this. I'm not 100% sure. What do you think? And what do we do about it? Is the style. You're far more likely to create flow and gain advantage. So look, 3 key ideas from the book: leadership versus management, line of probability, map out where you think your sector's going to go, place yourself ahead of it rather than follow it, and do so with team-driven evolution rather than from the top down. So using the team to drive the incremental changes whilst you work out the business model changes and the strategy changes. I'm going to be joined now by Joe Hinton from UK Business Mentors. Joe, can I ask a really silly question? Tech, I can't see myself on the screen. Can you see me?
You're lucky if you can't see you. I can see you, yeah, very clear, Kevin.
Well, that's good. So completely threw me. I've got no idea what's going on, but I won't worry about it. I'll just talk at a computer. It's fine. So, Joe, thank you for joining us. Just quick intro to UK Business Mentors. Can you just do 30 seconds?
Yeah, by all means. My background is I did 36 years in corporate banking, so please forgive me for that. And then 12 years ago, I started UK Business Mentoring, which is to provide support to SMEs. And we've been going for 12 years now, and now we franchise across the UK. So we've got UK coverage, and we also have a corporate finance arm to the business as well. So we work with lots of small, large, medium enterprises, helping them to grow, turning them around, preparing them for sale. And obviously, we work with you, Kevin, on that.
Of course.
Pleasure to be asked to join you today. Kevin, before I ask you any questions, can I just take one that's come through from one of the attendees, which I thought might just kind of set the scene is somebody's asked, are you positive about the economy post-COVID, post-Brexit? And I thought it'd be good just to get your opinion on that before we move forward.
It's a great question, isn't it? I am really positive. I think if the UK gets it right, then I think we can position ourselves. We have the legislation, we have the technology, we have the virtualisation. I know the professionals, the pundits bang on about the UK not being as productive as Europe. But obviously Europe is predominantly a manufacturing-led business sector, whereas we are more of an ideas sector. And I think if we use the creativity that we have in the UK, and we are incredibly creative post-Brexit on a global basis, because we have the legislation and the language advantage, and in the virtual world, we can take really significant advantage of that. I want to add to that, civil loans, furloughs. There's a lot of companies out there with good cash. Now, I know the war hasn't really started because we've kind of got this phony war, haven't we, because of all the government money printed. So there's going to be a lot of corporate failures. But fundamentally, I think if we stay positive and believe that we can scale up and grow, then we've got the best opportunity. What do you think, Joe?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I think some of the issues we've got with Brexit are hopefully short term. I've got clients who are exporters, and a lot of their products are not 100% manufactured in the UK, so they're having a nightmare at the moment in terms of getting their goods into the EU, in terms of increased costs, etc. And we're trying to get around that as best we can. However, we're hoping that over a period of time it beds down a little bit, and some of this craziness we're seeing at the moment. I've got a client who manufactures knitwear, and the yarn is British, but it's manufactured outside in Madagascar, and it's gone from £12 to send a garment to Europe to €95, which is just ridiculous, and can't afford to do it. So we're trying to do a workaround there in terms of where the goods come into, etc. But it is a bit of a nightmare at the moment. But I'm sure it will bed down. He's going to end up with a unit over in Holland where all the goods are going to go into, and it's going to be passed around the EU from there. It's just getting around that at the moment. So, but I actually do believe, as you do, that the economy, we could see a real surge. Because I think we've seen the economy really quashed, and it's whether or not businesses are ready for that, to take up the opportunity. There will be failures, of course there will be, but that will also provide opportunities for other businesses, I think.
I was going to say, listen to Max Reed. He had a failure in the IT sector before doing Netflix. What can I say? and most people don't fail in IT, do they?
No, exactly.
I don't think it was a full failure, but it wasn't a success. So yeah, we learned from that. Yeah.
Can I take you back to the point one you made about, which I do agree with, was that entrepreneurs can feel guilty when they're not working because they're so used to working hard, etc.
Yeah.
And it made me remember a client I was working with where we freed up their time, putting a structure in place, delegated loads of stuff. And the next time I went to see him, he found he'd freed up so much time that actually what he was then doing was taking control of the stationery ordering, because he had that time on his hands. So he completely missed the point. Maybe that was my issue with him. But so we work with a business owner and we create some time for them. By empowering, by putting a structure in place, whatever, and then they've got the time to start working on this stuff. But from your point of view, what's the start point for them?
So just being slightly specific. So the time to run all this stuff. What do you mean? What's the start point? Just
where do they go? So they've got this time on their hands now where they can start to think about compelling competitive advantage going forward and where their market might change.
I think it's really good question, Joe, because obviously, I'm kind of saying I want to link it to the line of probability. Ultimately, the ideas, right? Now, everybody comes up with ideas differently. What I do believe passionately is you don't get the ideas. Well, we're fortunate at the moment, we don't have to go into the office, but you don't get the ideas going into the office, answering questions from people who actually should be answering them themselves. Yeah. Kind of, what's that book, the old 1 minute manager thing,
Yes, yeah.
Tell me the answer, not the other way around. So I think ideas come from all sorts of places, but you've actually, it starts with yourself in terms of being fresh, and clear that it's your responsibility to have those ideas. And for me, it comes from research. You know, I do huge amounts of reading. I'm listening now to podcasts. I've got the Don't Tell Me the Score ones, which are the sports analogy, the disruptor ones. Obviously, you've got all the books. You've got Jim Collins. You've got that, and then workshops with the team. But I'm a big believer that one of the issues you have with ideas is that we look too much at what the competitors do. And actually the best ideas come from when you look at other businesses and other people and other sectors. So actually, I bet you every single one of us would have a story of how the best idea came from when they were on holiday and an experience of another business. And it's that creativity that's so important, but it's giving yourself permission to play and be fresh.
Yes. Yeah.
It's okay to be in a sandpit. And actually, the other point I have on ideas is there's no such thing as a daft question. You know, sometimes some of the stupidest questions bring out the best answers. And one of the great ones is, why are we doing that? Which is often really interesting, because when you really drill down, people go, actually, I really don't know why we do that.
Yeah. Other than we've always done that sometimes.
Other than we've always done that. We've had another question in, Joe. Actually, it's your wool story. I've got some sheep, by the way, so if you need wool,
yeah, just going on to that, the company that are moving part of their operation, actually all they're doing is the company's not relocating from the UK. They partner with a warehousing firm in Holland who will provide pick and pack facility. So their goods will come into a port in Holland, go into the pick and pack facility, and then be distributed across the UK. So actually, in that case, it doesn't cost any jobs in the UK. It's just an inconvenience, and more importantly for the business, it's an extra cost to the business that they've got to wear, either in their GP or pass the cost on to the clients, which is difficult in the fashion industry at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, but actually with that experience of dealing with Holland, I mean, we've got a client, Joe, we're probably going to try and sell it, but if they don't, you know, they've done really well in the online space that they manufacture and they bring in from Taiwan, but they don't know how to do the international distribution in Europe. So, you know, people being forced to do stuff like that brings opportunity as well. So working with the Europeans, would they get better at export and understanding how to operate in the European market? So even if jobs do move, there's that opportunity. We had a client phone up the other day who's got a very successful UK company, but 3/4 of their team are manufacturing in Hungary. It's pretty common, and we've been doing it for ages.
Yeah, yeah. The second point I wanted to come back to, Kevin, was you talked about being ahead in volatile markets and, you know, competitive advantage. But one of the things I see a lot is that some companies don't have their own compelling competitive advantage at the moment. But sometimes they'll have it, but they don't realise they've got it. And again, an example of that is we were working with a decent sized clearance company who described themselves as a clearance company. But when we got into the business, we realised that actually they have their own recycling plant. Something like 98% of what they clear commercially or residentially doesn't go to landfill. It's recycled, reused, etc., etc. So with them, basically, we've developed their compelling competitive advantage to be, actually, this is the company that rehomes, reuses, reloves your unwanted goods. And they've managed to double their turnover because now people see them as a sustainable company, not just a clearance company, guys in white vans coming along, taking it away and sending it to the tip. This is a company that actually has a heart and soul and believes in what it does. So we've developed a compelling competitive advantage. It's not new, it was always there, but they weren't singing and dancing and using it in their marketing, their website, etc., etc. So sometimes it can be there, but it's not being used. And that's, you know, part of what we do is to get into a business and find out, you know, what is distinctly different and what can this business shout about and tell the market about.
And I know you guys are good at that. I'm a great believer in you know, getting help in for that objectivity, because it's, you know, if you think about any top sports person, they'll have a coach for nutrition, you know, if it's tennis, a coach for the backhand, a coach for the forward hand. It's really hard to watch your game when you're playing it. And worse than that, you know, and I often wonder this, when you become expert, right, you're supposed to know everything. And the more successful you become in business, the more you have to say we're experts, yeah? So the more knowing you become, and when you become knowing, the less ideas you have. So it almost goes full circle. It's the day you think you're a master, it's the day you cease to be a master. And then you start discovering. And yeah. I find that really fascinating. So I don't think we play enough. And I agree with you that vast amount of businesses have got, you know, we call them hidden value drivers when we're selling companies, but, you know, best kept secret. And often somebody just objectively looking at your website saying, look, I spotted this bit. What's that all about? Can be a real start for a new division or a new product that you can amplify. And I think that's a great story, Joe. So really useful.
I think the other thing is, Kevin, we are in difficult times. Let's be honest. It's been a difficult year, and there's going to be difficult times ahead. And I think, you know, what we see sometimes with business owners, and it's very difficult not to slip into this. And there was one of the business owners I worked with a year ago in March, a week before lockdown. They just moved into their brand spanking new premises, which was 6 times as big as their previous premises. And you can imagine the leap up in rent, etc., etc., because they saw that this was going to be a fabulous year for them. And clearly the signs were with lockdown, it wasn't going to be. And they're in the hospitality and exhibition events market. And one of the traps that the owner fell into was when he saw lockdown come in and everything was happening, they moved into these new premises. He started talking to everybody about in the business, how rubbish it was, how difficult it was going to be, they were going to run out of cash in 6 months, etc., etc. And his right-hand man, who's the ops director, 3 weeks later handed his notice in because he'd been offered a job by Amazon. And the owner couldn't realise why he was losing this guy who was fundamental to the business. And the whole reason was he was worried about his future, worried about the job, because the MD had spent the last 3-4 weeks just saying how bad it was going to be and would they get through it, etc. And it's tough when you're the owner and the leader to always keep a positive spin on things. But there's that scene in Saving Private Ryan when one of the soldiers says to Tom Hanks, Captain Tom Hanks, "Captain, why do we never hear you moan? You know, all the rest of the troop moan, but we never hear you moan." And he comes out with what I think is a classic line is, he said, "I only ever moan up, I never moan down. I moan up to the general, you moan up to me, but I never moan down to you." And I think that's a really important one, because what this guy had done is created a really negative atmosphere in his business. Yeah. And all the staff were getting worried about their future, etc., etc. Now, it's not about misleading the staff, but I think it is about trying to keep that positive spin on things. We did manage to stop that guy going to Amazon, by the way, and they retained him. And strangely enough, that business has just now, November and December, had its best 2 months ever, because it's done what you're talking about here, Kevin, because it realised that it would manufacture fantastic experiential events for exhibitions, etc., etc. And obviously, none of those have happened in the last 12 months. But how they changed their business was that they did a lot of mobile stuff. So they went to their corporates and said, look, we can do this. We can provide you with a branded double-decker bus that you can take around and drive around the country showing your new products, etc., etc. So they've gone from the public coming to an event and seeing products to giving corporates vehicles and other mechanisms and digital where they could take their products to the client. And that's had a big difference. So they've had to really go through this transformation with their business over the last 12 months, and they've done it well.
Yeah, which is, I mean, well, we're both ex-bank guys, aren't we, Joe? I mean, one of the great advantages of being a small business is you can make those changes. When you're a corporate, it's just too much. You can't turn it. It's a Titanic. You can't turn it fast enough. So it's really exciting to hear those stories happen. I also think, Joe, you know, as a point, I don't know whether you agree with this, I think too many entrepreneurs beat themselves up when they go backwards. Sometimes you can't always get gold. You know, you learn from not getting gold and coming back in 4 years' time. It's you know, that's how the Olympic cycle works. You know, if the competition were better than you on the day and you didn't get gold, what can you learn from it? How can you do it next time? And it's as simple as that. So I think you know, you beat yourself up and you know, if your performance is dropping by 20% or that's okay, so long as you stay positive and you learn from it. And then it's what can you do better for the next time round?
Yeah, and it's hard, and a lot of our clients have gone through a traumatic year, and part of our job is to pick them up a little bit, because you know, we see the wider picture, and some businesses have gone through a tough year, but they're still here, and they've still got cash, and they're well placed for the recovery. And that's far better than a lot of other companies who are no longer with us, or are, you know, the proverbial zombie companies that won't be around for too much longer. So it is trying to focus on the positives and say, well, if you're still here and you've got the opportunity to ride this, hopefully this upsurge in the economy that's coming, then fantastic. And how can you make best use of it? I just want to go to another point you made about adaptive organisations, Kevin. And you were talking about the second tier management. What would you say are the key reasons why maybe that second tier management is not empowered or maybe developed in the way it should be? And you've frozen. And it looks like we might have lost Kevin, because I can't see his screen anymore. So I'll just slip into one of the things that we see when we're working with business owners, and it highlights Kevin's point, is that second tier management is not always, as I said earlier, empowered or developed. And we're great believers in that every business owner should have a second tier management that are growing and developing, and at one point, some point, should be able to take over from you, because it's always healthy to have somebody behind you who wants to take over your job. That is very healthy. Sometimes it's a bit unnerving, but it's very healthy for a business to have that succession coming behind. Kevin, you're back with us, I think.
I know, I just completely outed. I have no idea what happened there. So, talking about virtualisation and the Internet of Things, I should be having a word with BT.
I was just covering the point about second tier management, empowering and developing. And what do you see as the reasons why the second tier are maybe not empowered or trained or brought forward?
Well, I think first of all, we don't allocate budget to it. I think there's a sort of, you know, it's an investment. I think sometimes it's hard because, you know, trainers often aren't commercial, and I think that's the biggest challenge actually in the marketplace. But by that I mean all the training is on, you know, I suppose management skills, delegation, leadership style, you know, gravitas, etc., rather than the commercials of how you drive a business. And I think that's a really sort of important point. You know, what we like to do is workshop with the second tier the context of what's happening in the marketplace in order to get the ideas, and that's the sort of training we mean. So if you like, it's because there's no value placed on commercial training. The training is much more orientated to, you know, how they are as people rather than business models and competitive factors and so on. So I think that's one of the challenges. But people just don't allocate budget to it, and they don't allocate time to it. And I don't think you're ever going to grow on that basis. I think the other thing I thought was fascinating with the Max Reed talk, and I know I'm a bit hung up on this Disruptors series that I listened to, but he was saying in Netflix they don't pay bonuses. And the reason they don't pay bonuses is because if you pay bonuses, people hold the ball. So actually, it was a really interesting point that you were making there. You want your management team to pass the ball. So it comes back to managers want people to feel they're expert. You know, I'm the FD or I'm the COO. Therefore, I've got my department functioning correctly. And almost they enjoy if somebody else isn't necessarily succeeding in their department because it makes them look better. You know, that doesn't work. So you've got to find a way to break those silos down and get the senior team to pass the ball between them. We saw some examples of this on Saturday in the rugby, Joe, if you watched it, Adam.
I certainly do agree with that. We always say to business owners, you know, you're never going to build a great business unless you've got great people around you. And sometimes we do find that the people around the business owner are maybe not of not sufficient quality. So sometimes it's the development issue, and sometimes it's wrong people in the wrong job. And then we have to help them, move them on, and bring in other bodies that are going to take the business forward.
That's the right people on the right seats in the bus theory, isn't it, Joe? What's your view on, you know, I mean, it's tough firing people, right? And I'm not saying you have to do that, but you know, I think somebody once said to me that, you know, if somebody can't do their job, initially assume that you know, they need training. But if on the third strike they still can't do it, then you need to move into the sort of incompetence area. What's your view on you know, why people struggle to let people go? Why are we so cultural? Why do we hang on to our village?
I think because generally all of us like to be nice people and treat people, you know, in a nice way. But what I found over the years, and I've made a fair number redundant, etc., in my time, and dismissed people. And it's never pleasant. You never get a buzz out of it. But typically, when somebody is not performing well, it means then typically not enjoying it, and they know that things aren't right, and they're possibly not sleeping at night because they're worried. When's that moment going to come when the boss says to me, "This isn't working"? And this was brought home to me in my banking days, when I had an area manager working for me who was a good friend of mine as well. And I appointed him into the job, and 12 months in, he still wasn't performing, and I was spending lots of time coaching him, and he still wasn't getting it, and he still wasn't driving his performance. And ultimately we had the difficult conversation, and he actually said to me, he said, "This is a weight off my mind, because I've been waiting for when you were going to have this conversation." And he said, actually, he said, "It's been worrying me so much I haven't been sleeping." And I kind of thought, I didn't do the right thing by him. I should have done this sooner. And it was a relief to him. And you know, basically we busted him down, and he went down to the rank below and became a relationship manager again, and was very happy again. So it was a bit of a lesson for me, where I realized that if you're allowing somebody to continue and not perform, you're not being fair to them, because they'll know it and they'll be worrying about it.
So long as you've been clear what you define as performance, Joe.
Yes.
Actually, one of the issues I see with SMEs is they're quite cultural. So we're back to, they don't define the roles and responsibility correctly. So often with second tier management, you say, well, you know, can we see the job roles? And it's the job role that they had 5 years ago when they recruited them, but the business model's moved. So, you know, you've got to remap the job role out and make it clear what you're expecting people to do, and check for deliverability. Because the other thing is, you know, if you get it right, you should have the time as a leader to have the space to think. But of course, if somebody is failing, it's so easy to go in and take over, isn't it? It
is. Sometimes it can be also too easy to jump in and think we need to get rid of them, when actually what you need to do is possibly have what we call just a candid conversation. Look them in the eye and say, "This is not working, and these are the reasons why it's not working. Now let's discuss why you think that is," and have that candid conversation with them, which sometimes is just enough to make them realise, I need to up my game. I need to do some things differently.
Yeah.
But unless they're told, you're not being fair to them.
Yeah.
So you've got to be fair to your people. Yeah.
Guys, you know, we've still got quite a lot of you on, despite my tech outage. So that's good. But please fire some questions. We'd love to take them. Joe, I've got a question. Line of probability. Can you forecast the future? Do you agree with the statement?
I do, to a certain extent, which I guess that means I disagree with it. I think you can, but I think there are some areas that are very, very difficult to predict. You know, you have to look at digital, look at the world of the digital marketing, the digital programs, apps, etc., etc. And if you go back 5, 10, 20 years, how many of us could have forecast that then? So I think you can forecast how things will develop, maybe current practices, current models, etc. But I think forecasting where we'll be in 10 or 20 years is probably too far out. I certainly couldn't have forecast, where we'd be 25, 30 years ago. Let's be honest, if you think about your marketing, 20 years ago, we would all get our businesses up and running and stick an advert in the yellow pages. Life was simple then. That was it. And your only choice was, do I go for just a listing or do I go for a quarter, half or full page? And that was as complicated as it got. And now you've got a multitude of ways that you can market and spend your money. I don't think any of us could have predicted that.
No, well, I've got small shares in a Mark Tech company, and they were pretty close to early adopters. But I do agree with you; it's hard to be. There's the benefit of hindsight, isn't there, with the blockbusters, execs, and the Netflix. But I want to share the story, which I do share in the book, which is looking for the positive disruption. So, when Daimler-Benz came out with the carbon combustion engine, and they built the first car in 1887. It didn't disrupt the horse and cab market, and the actual disruption occurred in 1905. So basically, in 1887, everyone would laugh and go, "What the hell is this thing? It's a nonsense." But you can see it coming. So I'm actually not asking people to predict the car. What I'm saying is, go out and walk into the wilderness. You'll spot the disruptions. Then you've got a chance to spot the trends. By 1910, there were no horse and cabbies left, or 1915. So the product was invented in 1887. It took that long to adopt. So I think it's a sort of important story. So I'm not asking you to predict the future when I'm asking you to spot the trends. Different thing.
There's a few questions coming now.
Yeah.
The first one we got was, do you want me to just read them out? We can all see tech companies are fast tracking. Do you have any insight into how technology can help businesses grow? So run the question one more time, because I can't see that one. We can all see tech companies are fast tracking. Do you have any insight how technology can help businesses grow? Yeah,
absolutely. So we've aligned ourselves with 2 or 3 key technology consultants and strategists, and I think the issue you've got with those guys, and I'm not criticizing them, they're brilliant, but they don't get commercial business models. So you've got to fuse the objective of the business and the vision of the business with the IT guys, and you've got to work out how you create that translation. I think for me, the real key with this is to design your business around the IT rather than bolt the IT on. I think too many businesses have got sort of layer cake on IT, because it's history, isn't it? You've got this app, you've got that app, you've got that system, you've got that process. So you build it out by layer cake, and it's a bolt-on rather than central to the business model. So it's almost like, forget what you're doing right now. If you were starting a business today with what you knew, in order to place IT, automation, and AI at the center to help your customers and your employees, how would you design it? And work outwards, not upwards. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, hopefully that's useful.
A question from Alex. Kevin, from the perspective of acquiring a standalone business, how would you describe raising funds in the current climate versus pre-COVID?
Well, we both do finance, Joe, so we should both answer this. Difficult. I think, the civil loans have distracted the lenders. People are still very interested in lending. I think buyers will take a view on what we call, sort of EBIT modeling, which is allowing for COVID disruption in valuations. But I'm not sure lenders are there yet. They need to see real-time numbers of current recovered performance to lend, and I don't think everybody's got that. We're all still facing the echoes of the of COVID. So honestly, I think that means there's more. We do acquisitions, probably more earnouts and more vendor loans to pick up on where that bank funding is slightly weaker than it would have been.
Yeah, I agree with that. Colin asked us to remind us of the author of the book, and I guess that's your book at the beginning, Kevin Up.
Well, it could be. It's Creating Competitive Advantage by Kogan Page. It's on Audible Books, but I think he's referring to the book that's probably outsold is, I suspect, E-Myth by Michael Gerber.
Ah, right.
I think
Michael E. Gerber, the E-Myth.
Yeah, Mike E. Gerber. I don't know. Should I put Kevin J. uphill rather than Mike E? Will it sell more?
And we got a question from our end. Real market disruption is not realistic or likely for the majority of SME businesses. If that's true, how, in your opinion, should these businesses compete and grow?
That's a great question. Great question. I think marginal gains is probably the answer. I don't agree. I agree with the the disruption, which is real market disruption, which is fundamentally changing a market. Your Dysons and your Netflix, great, but we can't all aspire to that. And to a certain extent, there's a bit of luck involved in that as well, guys, isn't there?
Yeah.
So I think it's as much about positioning on a marginal gains basis, and it's a sum of the parts. So if your retention is that little bit better, if your management team are that little bit better at managing those incremental innovations and spotting them, if your brand stands out that little bit more, so it's the sum of the parts on marginal gain that then disrupts the market, because you're quite simply better than competitors. We all see it from time to time. You kind of, I don't know, I used to play squash, and you go out on a squash court and you're all right, you're good, you're feeling well, you come out, and this slightly slow, loping, larger fellow comes into the middle of the squash court and totally takes you apart by dominating the centre of the court and just playing better. And you think, he's unfit, what's this all about? They just know the game better, and they're a little bit better on every element. And so for me, that is disruption.
Mm. And I go back to the story I mentioned about the clearance company. I think it is for many SMEs is revisiting what's your compelling advantage at the moment. Do you have one? And if you can't see one, what could it be, or what should it be? And that clearance company, distinctly had one, but they just never made anything of it. So I think it's about looking inward and saying, what have we got? What is different about us? And if we clearly haven't got anything, what could be different about us going future? It may not be a disruptor, but it may just be a competitive advantage to give you that edge over the competition going forward. We've got another question here from Aaron. So better execution then? I would agree, that's my experience too. And yeah, I think that's echoing what we've just said there. Okay.
What do you think about business plans, Joe, and with all the volatility going on? Is it just, people use the excuse, I can't write them because the market overtakes me every time? And right now, it's even worse, isn't it? What do you think?
About business, sorry, I lost you there.
Business plans. Business plans,
yeah.
What do you
9 out of 10 businesses that we work with don't have a business plan. They will have had one in the past.
Yeah.
And it tended to be a document produced for a lender, maybe for finance, or when they started up the business. And we're not advocates of, an SME business writing a 50-page business plan, because, to be honest, it tends not to get used. We are a great advocate of a very short and simple business plan, and that might just be 1 or 2 pages to focus people on what it is they want to achieve and what needs to happen. So once you know what the strategy is and where you're going is, what do we actually need to do? What actions do we need to take? And then have a rolling action plan that they'll monitor each month. That to us is a good dynamic business plan. So we like it simple. The smaller, the better. The biggest business plans I've seen are the ones that sit in drawers and get covered in dust and nothing happens. So we prefer to make it smaller plan, very simple, lots of actions around it, but it's a rolling plan. So it's reviewed every month. So you'll be adding and taking from it each month. And then it's more dynamic. But I think every business should have some kind of plan, because just by the very nature of creating a plan, it makes people take action, which means therefore the business moves forward.
I think that's great. I mean, I would just emphasize on that. Why and where can you be better? You know, not necessarily the how. I mean, you need the actions, because often people have these plans and they don't put the action steps in, which is also important. But you know, fundamentally, not doing the same exactly as everybody else, but why and where can you be better is a key question when you're writing that plan, because people write the plans and it's, oh, I need the forecast, I must put all the steps and actions in, and they forget kind of that vision is still needed. And there is a share there, Joe, which is, I call it leap of faith. You don't know whether it's going to work. And actually, you've got to look at your risk ratio when it comes to that. I remember Lloyd's Bank wrote a book about starting a business, and years ago, I think it was Sarah Williams or something. It was a very, very good little basic book on accounting and skill sets of an entrepreneur, and it was really practical. And she starts it with, you've got to understand your risk ratios. And I think it's quite interesting, because actually, as you get more established, you kind of maybe stop taking those leaps of faith because you don't need to. And in a business plan, maybe you do need to be aware of where you need to challenge yourself and challenge those preconceptions on the risk basis.
And the biggest risk is with any business plan is it's produced and then it's not implemented, because everything else, all the stuff gets in the way. So the best business owners I come across are business owners where they repeat the same few disciplines every day. Yeah. Where they'll be reviewing a plan or doing this or measuring their KPIs, but they do it consistently, almost boringly. They'll consistently be doing the same things, checking, making sure that's happening, making sure that plan's happening. And they're the ones where we see it happening. The ones who are kind of all over the place, and you know, there's always a reason why they haven't done anything on their plan. Those are the ones that it's harder to get to progress forward. So it's those who've got the discipline and the focus. And that's the bit that we find challenging, is getting the business owner to focus and keep those actions coming, because otherwise they never make progress.
That's brilliant, Joe. I mean, I suffer from what do you call it, ADHD, you know. So many ideas, which do you choose? And you're absolutely right about that discipline, because you know, you have the idea and then you know, you're off on the next one, which I also, when I'm working as a sort of mentor, I call it flying kites. How often does the leadership team get knocked off course by the next best salesman in front of them? And that happens a lot. So you got, no, my vision is, and the steps we need to do are, and we are going to do them. And that's not easy, because actually many leaders don't actually enjoy execution. They're all about ideas and not execution, which is quite fascinating. So I think we've done a lot here, Joe. Is there anything you want to say to sum up? We're going to.
No. I think for me the most important thing in the topic of today, Kevin, and I think the questioner who said, you know, SME disruption in an SME market is very unlikely. I think there's a lot in that. So for me, it's about, you may not be a business that's going to disrupt, but what is your competitive, compelling advantage at the moment? And look inwardly at your business to find what that is. And if you haven't got one, then talk to some people, find out what it is or what it could be, so you know what it is going forward, because that will be the thing that will give you the edge. It's my clearance company now being a totally sustainable company that has a great reputation. They're not doing anything different, but they're talking about what they're doing and then using it in their marketing. So that would be my advice to people, is look inwardly at your business.
But really good advice, Joe. Thank you for joining. Thank you for sharing your insights on some of my ideas. I think we work well together. This webcast will be on our website. We'll also circulate it. If you've got any more questions, please look us up, send us emails. We're more than happy to talk about this. Apologies for the tech issues, my end, typical. Talking about, you know, globalization and tech and all the rest of it, and get let down this end. But hope you've enjoyed it. We have loved you joining us, and we've got some more webinars coming up. So please also feel free to contact and join us on those. Have a great day, and thank you all for listening. Thanks very much. Cheers all.
Cheers, Kevin. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Cheers.